All right, guys. Good morning. Welcome to the first live stream on the backup channel 11 Yanks Soccer. We are continuing to cover the national team, even though we have been hacked by crypto bros on the main channel. I want to read real quick an email that I got from the Google support team this morning. Okay, quite an interesting one, actually. This is what they have said to me today. Hi, Peter. Hope you are well. We can tell how vital it is for you to have all this sorted out. It has been more than 3 weeks now, okay? I've been communicating with them. As much as I'd like to, we are not able to provide any specific details and time frame as our internal team is still looking into it. Rest assured that we are doing our very best to have it potentially resolved. Hang tight. For now, no action is required from you, but we'll let you know as soon as we get an update. Do not hesitate to reply back if you have any other questions. Many thanks. Best. That's it. So this has sort of been the level of communication I've been having with them back and forth for the last 3 to 4 weeks. So I can continue to email them back and forth and try to find a solution, which I will continue to do. Or I can continue to cover the national team like I have been doing for the last 5 years, albeit on a different channel. But my woes with hackers and Google support is not the theme of this stream. We're going to talk about Poch's presser. Actually, I've clipped some clips from the press conference, and I'm going to give my thoughts on some things that he says because I think a lot of it is very eye-opening, albeit vague, and maybe intentionally vague, right? And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the Alex Freeman hype train, which is steaming along in a very interesting and almost out of the blue way, which I find quite interesting. You have to remember that when we are talking about MLS and US soccer and the sort of landscape that we're dealing with, usually there are coordinated efforts, and it's not so much random as much as people think it is. We've seen this with many players in the past. Where all of a sudden they are the next big thing, at least while they're still in MLS. And there is a coordinated effort to try to make them the next big thing. And, fans are going, huh? I don't see it. We saw this many times with Jesus Ferreira or Daryl DK or Duncan McGuire or, Christian Roldan or Jordan Morris. It's, this thing happens over and over again. Max Arfson, Patrick Agyemang. So we'll see, right? I'll talk about that a little bit later. But for now, we're going to start with, um, we're going to start by talking about the press conference. Hit that like button if you have not already, guys. We are trying to get this sort of well known as the place where the camp will be covered. All the post games will be here. This Sunday, we're going to do the top 10 here on this channel. So hit that like button, leave comments, watch the whole thing. Even if you have to run, do me a favor, leave the stream on. We want to try and get those watch hours up so we can hit 4,000 before the camp. By the way, we're already at 2,300 watch hours and over 1,000. So we just need to get to 4,000 watch hours, and then we're good to go. So thank you for all the support, all the love, all the messages you guys have sent me. We will continue to cover despite the setbacks, right? Because that's what we do. All right. Don Garber hacked the 11 Yanks account. No, I don't think it's anybody at US Soccer or MLS. I don't think I am big enough for them to care about me. They have other ways of getting what they need. All the moves, let's see how they pan out. Hopefully every USMNT player does good. Agreed. Dest at 17 years old was better than the current Freeman. Also agreed. Pete, have we officially lost Brown? Yes, I would say yes. We've lost Brown because we never really tried to get him. Dang, so it wasn't the turd in the background. As far as we know, Judgmental Deity, we don't know if it was the turd in the background. Matt, I've been looping your videos, Pete. We appreciate you. Thank you. Appreciate it, man. That's a huge help, and we're definitely seeing it in the watch hours. Poch is a MLS shill. Won't be totally surprised as the undeserving players at the World Cup. I think it's more a question, Green Great Basin, of how many undeserving players will there be and not will there be undeserving players. If there are 10 undeserving players, that's bad. If there are 1 or 2, it's also not good. If there are 3 or 4, it's also not good, but obviously not as bad, right? Yeah. So let's see how this does. But let's talk about Mauricio Pochettino.
Athletic.
I've clipped a couple of the the talking points from what Poch has said during the press conference after the roster was released, and I'm going to give my thoughts. Okay.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Mauricio. This question is kind of similar to what you were just talking about, which
This is Paul Tenorio, by the way, asking the question.
is the strategy of this window. How much is it about seeing as many players as you can, but then also what kind of message are you sending, or what kind of message is there for players like, there's kind of two groups in my mind, players like Weston McKennie and Yunus Musa, who have been kind of bigger parts of the team starting in the last World Cup, but then also players like Aiden Morris and Tanner Tessman, who are also trying to break in, but maybe find themselves now behind guys like Sean Zawadzki or Jack McGlynn in the depth chart. Thank you.
Yes, for me, yes. No, for me, all the players are important. The individual situations, I think, are important, and to analyze and to take the decisions and to have the plan for them. I think is we have a roster 65 player that with this guy that are going to appear in the last roster now in this camp, that we are going to be under assessment every single week, and for us it's about for them to perform, and for us to select the best player to make, and to provide the roster the good balance. That is the most important, because sometimes if you see the teams with the possibility to compete and to perform and to get the result that you want, it's about to have a good balance on the team. It's true that it's going to be difficult, because when you manage 65 players on the end, to reduce to 26 is not easy, or like in that case for this camp 23. But it's important because we wanted to know, and we don't have too much time, because we start in last October, and now it's still not 1 year. And I think for us it's so important to give the chance to all the players. We really know this player that you were talking in the different camps in the past. We really know how they are, what can provide to the team. That is why I think we really know, and now the chances for different players in that position, like Sebastian Berhalter or Luca de la Torre or Zawadzki, or different players like this. I think it's important for us to assess and to give the chance in not only in the Gold Cup, if not now in a roster that is completely different, that is going to be a different competition. I think for us is also to assess them in this competition too. But for sure, all that are in a place to compete for the final roster on the World Cup. And like always I said, of course, it's my test, it's our test about to select the player, but also it's up to them to perform and to show that they are desperate to come to the national team. That's it.
All right. So Poch there said a whole lot of nothing. Used the word balance a couple of times, which it's a great word because it means literally nothing, right? You can say the word balance all you want. Balance, balance, balance. It is a great way to deflect accountability, to not have to give an actual answer. And he said this about Weston McKennie separately, but he said it here in his answer to the question about Tessman, Morris, McKennie, and Musa. And he said, we already know what these guys offer. Okay. As though he's been calling them up over and over and over again. And now he needs to look at other guys. What's crazy is that he's been calling up guys that he's seen all year, including for a month and a half in the Gold Cup, right? Luca de la Torre, Sebastian Berhalter, Max Arfsen, Alex Freeman, Jack McGlynn, right? And was going to be Brian White before he got injured. We ended up getting Fowler and Balogun only because Brian White got injured. Yeah, if you don't know, he called these guys up in the January camp. He called them in the March camp, and he called them for the entire Gold Cup. He got to see them against bad opponents, like we saw in the Gold Cup, where they were not that good. And then he got to see them against better opponents like Switzerland and Turkey and Mexico, and they were terrible. So what exactly are you trying to evaluate about these players? Whereas right? You know what McKennie offers, supposedly, what Musa offers, what Tessman and Morris offers, and yet you've called them up significantly less than these guys that you supposedly need to see, right? And then he says, oh, we're against this different type of opponent, okay? So essentially saying better opponent than what we faced in the Gold Cup. Sure, but you also saw them against Turkey and Switzerland, and they were shit. So what more do you need to see, Poch? It's a whole lot of excuses here, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But he did throw the word around of balance a lot. Balance, have to see balance. Yeah, okay. What are you saying with balance? That doesn't make any sense. Balance of what? Good versus bad players? You need a balance of some quality players and some terrible ones? Let's continue. So Matthew Dominguez here asking, is it possible Poch wants to see if these bums can compete against real competition before bringing them to the World Cup? Like if they can't compete against Japan and Korea, they have no business. Possibly, Matthew Dominguez, I could tell you right now these guys can't compete against Japan and Korea from seeing their level at the Gold Cup, A. B, we saw them against Turkey and Switzerland, and they did not look good against Turkey and Switzerland, right? So how much exactly data points do you need? To me, it sounds like a whole lot of excuses to call up MLS players, and we're going to address that as the presser goes on.
Next will be Doug McIntyre from Fox.
Thanks, Michael. Mauricio, thanks for doing this. Good to see you. Hope you had a good summer. Wanted to follow up on Weston McKennie specifically. He's not a guy who's coming off an injury. He's not a player that has switched clubs like a lot of your other players. Why did you decide specifically not to bring him in this window? And what does he have to do to be considered in the windows to come?
I think we really know Weston. It's not necessary to call him to know. I think he's in a situation that arrived, with the precision because he was involved in the Club World Cup, and I think and now start the season last week in Italy, and I think for different reasons, I think we really know him, but we wanted to give, the possibility to be more settled in his club and have the possibility, to be in his best form. Like him, another player for sure, but that is not a situation that is new. I think for us, like him, different player, that like Johnny Cardoso also that move and start to play with Atletico de Madrid also is give time to them to adapt in a new environment for different players, different reason, but knowing that they need to perform. And then if they perform, for sure they're going to have the possibility. But no one have the place, sure, and that is my message for everyone that need to fight, because that is an open system, and then we suffer in this summer a lot of injured players, and we need to be ready because maybe 1 week before to announce the roster for the World Cup, and maybe some problem arrive, and I think it's fair to have different player and know a different player with the possibility for them also to fight and to know that they have the possibility to be on the roster, and that is the moment to see different faces and to give different players the possibility, like I told you before, Sebastian or De La Torre or Zawoski, is to
Sebastian and De La Torre you've had in camp many times. Why are you seeing a different player? No, they're not different players. There's the exact same ones you've been calling up.
Competing in this international, way with two important teams like Japan and Korea, and see how they react and how they deal with this type of competition. I think for
So, Clutch City content. We are going to talk about Alex Freeman in a little bit here. So here's the problem with this, right? Poch is saying something that actually I agree with, and I think somebody here in the chat is talking about Weston McKennie. At times, Weston McKennie has been too casual for the national team and a little bit too entitled with his spot. Maybe a bit of a clown off the pitch. Also, putting on weight. He's had weight issues with Juve in the past, although he's looking a little slimmer now, coming back into the season. And look, the concept of everybody needs to fight for their spot and perform is a good idea. It's a good concept, right? My problem is that it's pure hypocrisy from Pochettino, okay? Because if you are assuming he's leaving Weston McKennie off of the team because he has not performed, you may have an argument to make. Here's the problem, though. He continues to call up guys who have not performed also, okay? How bad was Nathan Harriel in that opening game of the Gold Cup and in the previous friendlies? So bad he didn't even play again. So why is he back? Max Arfson can't defend for his life against Gold Cup level opposition. Why is he back? Right? Sebastian Berhalter, Luca De La Torre were extremely poor in the Gold Cup, right? Against low level opposition. Why are they back? Patrick Aguimang was consistently awful throughout the Gold Cup. Why did he continue to start? If you're going to say this is about accountability and performance, then the guys who perform like shit consistently need to be dropped. But when it only applies to a Weston McKennie or a Yunus Musa or a Mark McKenzie or a Joe Scally or a Johnny Cardoso, then all of a sudden, you're being a hypocrite. And it starts to look like an MLS bias. Okay? If you did this across the board, it would be easier to believe. But because you are only doing it with the European players and the MLS players get a free pass where no matter how much they perform, right, then they can still keep playing and still getting call-ups, then your entire argument goes out the window because it doesn't pass the sniff test. We can see bullshit when you put it in our face, okay? So let's not try and pretend that's what it's really about right now, okay? It's not about that. It's about something else. And he goes on to say it. Here we go.
For me, I think we need to open an.
So I clipped this little part here. It was a question in Spanish that he answered in Spanish, and now he's answering it again in English for our benefit.
Another, way to see the things. We need to give the MLS the value because
He's saying the quiet part out loud here, right? We need to give the MLS value. Interesting.
in competing there, I think the player can show that they can perform in the national team.
What MLS player has shown that he can perform in the national team? Maybe Tim Ream? Sure. Maybe Matt Freese? Sure. Had a good Gold Cup. Let's see how he does against better opposition. Not a perfect Gold Cup, right? Tim Ream, also not perfect, but deserves to be here. Diego Luna, for example, had a good Gold Cup. Didn't look so good against the better opposition either. But at least Luna, I see no people complaining about Luna being involved, right? If you play well for the national team, at least against the lower level opposition, then you're fine with, okay, let's see how Luna looks against the better opposition, right? If you don't even look good against the low level opposition, why should you keep getting called in against the good opposition, right? So the problem is, if you, again, you're saying, oh, they have shown they can perform. Okay, but the ones who showed they cannot perform, De La Torre, Berhalter, McGlynn, Aguimang, Arfson, guys like that, now you're still calling them up. Again, sense. There's some hypocrisy there.
I think it's not necessary to move from MLS to Europe.
That's a very dangerous thing to be saying. It is not necessary to move from MLS to Europe. The message that he's sending is one of complacency. Yes, stay in MLS. Stay in a league that has no promotion relegation, that is an exhibition league. That is a closed soccer system that lacks accountability, where no matter how you play every week, you will continue to start because there is no real competition for spots in MLS rosters, where you can be Alex Freeman on the weekend, standing watching Inter Miami score a goal and giving up on the play, and he will still start every single game this weekend. There is no accountability. And yet what we are saying is no need to go push yourself at a league where there is accountability. Stay in MLS, right?
Because sometimes the MLS, under my assessment, maybe is more competitive than some league in Europe.
Excellent line. Love this line because it means nothing. The word competitive. What does competitive mean? It can mean a lot of different things depending on the context, but competitive means what? Well, it means there's a lot of people at a similar level. That says nothing about level, right? If I go to an under 5 game on the weekend and there's a bunch of 5-year-olds standing in a circle, kicking the ball off each other's legs, waiting for it to pop out, and then they move like a little amoeba and do the same thing over and over again, and the game ends 1-1, both goals scored accidentally, that is competitive, right? They are both equally bad. That does not mean that is a good league. Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic. But being competitive does not mean good. Competitive just means a lot of teams are on the same or similar level. That doesn't mean it's a good level. And that doesn't mean there's any real pressure or accountability to perform. Okay? And also the word Europe. Of course, Europe, MLS is a better league than, I would argue, the majority of the leagues in Europe in terms of quality. Okay? But this is a really silly thing to say because we are not asking for players from the Lithuanian league. We're not even asking for the players from the Croatian league, even though the Croatian league has a few teams that like to do okay in the Champions League from time to time. Most of the players that we are clamoring for are players who have played or are playing in the top 5 leagues in Europe. Okay, whether it's Mark McKenzie in Ligue 1 or Tanner Tessman in Ligue 1 or Joe Scally in the Bundesliga, right? So, or Johnny Cardoso playing for one of the best teams in the world. These are the players that we're asking to be called in instead of some of these MLS bums. And he's like, for me, MLS is more competitive than Europe. I have 2 issues. The word Europe is very vague, right? And the word competitive also very vague, but a great way to promote MLS to the tune of $6 million a year, which is what Poch seems to be doing.
We have some players maybe competing in different leagues that maybe are not so competitive or in every single week compete in the same way that you compete in the MLS every single week. But that is my adjustment, and that is in the way to see. That is why we don't used to compare. Oh, if you play in a team in Europe, you are above of the players that are in the MLS. That is not the way to assess the player. I think the possibility, because I think in one thing that we are good with the coaching staff is to see and to project the player how they can perform with us. And then the most important thing is to provide the characteristics and the roster, the balance. You cannot bring, 23 offensive player because it's difficult after to find the balance to defend in that phase. But
who is asking for 23 attacking players, Poch? Do you see the condescension in that comment, you guys? We cannot bring 23 attacking players. I don't think there's a single fan in the country, although there are some dumb ones, no matter how dumb they are, that is asking for 23 attacking players. We are talking about position-specific players and comparing the players who were called up versus the players that play in their position, right? And also, Poch's whole thing about, we need to take a look at all the different players. Except you're bringing Alex Freeman again. And by the way, I actually don't have a problem with Alex Freeman being on this roster. I think he's a young enough player with a decent enough upside that he can continue to get looks. But if you really wanted to get a look at all of our different right backs, why not take a look at Brian Reynolds or Marlon Fossey, right? If it's really about we need to see the pool, then why do you keep calling in so many of the same guys from MLS, right? So it's not really about that at all. And this was a very blatant promotion for MLS with what he was saying here. And reality is, as we saw in the last World Cup, there were many MLS players who performed fine to decent in CONCACAF and then went to a World Cup and couldn't even compete at any level at the World Cup, just looked completely out of their depth. And this is what we are preparing for. We are preparing for the World Cup. We are not preparing to play Guatemala. We are not preparing to play, even Panama, right? We are preparing to play at the World Cup. And I'm sorry, but the vast majority of MLS players, especially the American ones, who are usually not the DPs, okay, we're not talking about Lionel Messi or even Hani Mukhtar, who Germany isn't even remotely looking at, although I think he might make our roster if he was American, right? We're not talking about those type of players that are playing in MLS. We're talking about these very run-of-the-mill players. And we saw this in the last cycle. Your Kellen Acostas, your Christian Roldans, your Jordan Morrises, your DeAndre Yedlins, your Shaq Moores. These guys could not even perform in the World Cup at a decent level, right? This is something we fans have seen over and over again. So when he talks about the possibility to compete in the national team, we are preparing for a World Cup. This is not CONCACAF. This is not January Cap. This is not Gold Cup. This is not Nations League. We're talking about who can be competitive in a World Cup against some of the best teams in the world. And no matter how many times you look at Tristan Blackman, he is not a World Cup level player and never will be.
Also, if you bring defensive player, it's difficult after with the ball to play in the way that you want to play. That is why the balance is the most important.
Such a ridiculous statement to act like people are asking for
And the
23
player need to understand
players.
that they need to
How stupid does he
perform
think
in
we
the
are?
best ways, and after when they come to the national team is to perform in the way that we want to perform.
Is the Gold Cup the way that you wanted to perform, Poch? No, I'm genuinely curious. This is the way we want to perform. Is the Gold Cup the way you wanted to perform? Because you're rewarding a lot of Gold Cup players. Is how we played against Mexico in the final the way we want to perform? Is how we played against Turkey and Switzerland the way that you want to? Because if we perform like that, we're getting grouped at the World Cup. There's no shame. This guy has had the worst start of any USMNT national team coach ever, and he has zero shame about it. And there's almost no pressure from the media about it either.
But that is in the way that we have the plan or our strategies is, and in the way that we compare the players.
Next will be Seth Vertelny.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for the time, Mauricio. I wanted to ask about Noekai Banks. He's a player that.
So we're going to end on a bit of a positive note. Noekai Banks, one of the few positives to come into this roster. But even when he talks about Noekai Banks, it really makes you wonder about his player evaluation capacity, okay? And I'll explain why. You'll see why in just a second.
Doesn't have a lot of experience at the senior level, but obviously has a lot of potential. What have you seen from him that makes you think he's ready for this opportunity now at age 18?
It's a great opportunity to see, too. I think he's a young talent. I saw play him in Germany, and he's a massive talent. And also, you never know how he can explode, and maybe on the end of the season can be the best central back in Europe or in Germany.
Okay, Poch. Now this is where people say I'm anti-MLS. Let's pump the brakes on Noekai Banks. Look, I'm excited he's here. He seems to be a good young prospect. He's not even starting for Augsburg this season. Actually, has played no minutes for Augsburg this season. And I think most of us would take him being a starter for Augsburg by the end of the season. We would take that as a very good season with a good trajectory, working his way into the starting lineup. But when Poch says it's possible that he could be the best defender in Europe or in Germany by the end of the season, I have to call bullshit again, because what are you saying? That's not how this works. You don't just go from being the academy player or a bench player to the best player if you're the best defender in Europe, you're the best defender in the world, right? You don't just go to being the best defender in the world overnight. That's not how that works, especially not when you're 18 years old. Does not make any sense to me that why he said that. It just makes me question his player evaluation mechanisms. Although I'm happy that Noekai Banks will be there.
And for us, like I explained before, it's a great opportunity to add new faces. And then we work for a
Then why did you add so few new faces? Why did you keep bringing in the Sebastian Berhalters and Luca De La Torres and Jack McGlinns of the world, right? And Brian Whites, who you tried to add, but he was injured, unfortunately. Max Arfson, Alex Freeman, right? You brought a lot of the same guys there, Poch.
legacy too. For us, it's difficult because we don't have time because
Yeah, you don't have time. We're 8 months out from the World Cup, and you're still tinkering with your MLS players. You have to remember, Poch, that, he said earlier in the press conference, oh, maybe in October we'll call some of these other guys up. Dude, we have 3 camps left before the World Cup starts. Okay? You have October, November, and March. Those are the camps. These are the camps to bring in the European players, right? To take a look at them. 3 camps, 6 games left. And this guy's acting, he said, yeah, we don't have so much time. Then call up the right guys so they can get minutes working together and working under you. You can set expectations in camp. And if somebody's really goofing off and not performing, fine, leave. But then you have to do that across the board with everybody, whether they're in Europe or whether they're in MLS. If you're not performing, leave. Nathan Herriot, the most egregious call-up in this roster, has never, this dude got completely clowned by a high school freshman recently in training. Was terrible in the Gold Cup, has never been a good player, terrible in the Olympics. Why is he still getting called up? Hypocrisy.
we don't have time
You can't demand accountability with your words and then do something different with your actions.
to do too many changes because we start less than 1 year ago and start to work. And you know that the conditions are not the best. But I think the possibility to bring Noah Banks and to see him and to give some the possibility to get experience, and then it's going to be a big boost for him. And then it's a legacy because I think can be a really important player in a position that for every single national team is difficult to find, this type of profile of player. And I think for us it's important for us and for him now to discover a different level of competition, and it's going to be good to assess him with us.
So that would be interesting to see what Noekai Noekai Banks does, and Nathaniel Brown is still on the brain. I will be honest. I'm hoping we get some minutes for Noekai Banks in this camp, and maybe he will, maybe he won't. We will see. But he is one of the few good call-ups in this camp. And so we'll see how much time he gets. Just don't say he's going to be the best defender in the world by the end of the season, okay? Because that's really unnecessary and makes us doubt your talent evaluation. If you say, look, he could be a starter in the Bundesliga or a good Bundesliga player by the end of the season. Now we go, okay, we can trust what this guy knows what he's talking about. But you just seem like really not good at your job if you say something like he could be the best defender in the world or in Europe or in Germany by the end of the season, because we all know that's not going to happen, right? So that's a little bit about what Poch has been saying. It seems to me, guys, that Poch is very much here to promote MLS to the tune of $6 million a year. And while in principle, I don't have an issue with him demanding accountability, it seems to be accountability for some, but not for others. And that's where it makes me question, is his goal accountability, or is his goal to, promote MLS? Okay. That is my big question about Monsieur Pochettino. Now, let's talk very briefly about Alex Freeman, okay? Alex Freeman, who, by the way, I like as a player. And really, I don't have a problem with him being on this roster. I think he's probably our third choice right back. Daniel Brown, my good friend, you've been chirping about this in the games. I don't know how much MLS you've watched in your life. I've been watching MLS since 2013. I used to be a Chicago Fire season ticket holder. went to every home game that we had, watched a lot of away games on TV, been to multiple MLS stadiums, and watch at least 3 or 4 MLS games a week, mostly to track our young players on the Apple TV app. So when somebody disagrees with you about something, which is fine, and you would have no idea how much MLS they watch, and you say, does Pete even watch the games? It sounds like you don't have a good argument to make and that you're just unhappy that I said something that you disagree with. So go ahead and disagree with me and maybe say, I disagree with your assessment of MLS. I think MLS is a lot better than you think it is. Or I think that MLS, there are certain teams in MLS or certain players in MLS that I think are good. But you go, does Pete even watch the game? Yeah, believe me, buddy, I've watched more MLS probably than you have in your entire life. So this is not a good argument. I watch the games. I've been to at least 7 or 8 MLS stadiums to watch games, so in person and on TV. Yes, I do. And this is my honest assessment of MLS and the level that it's at. And you're welcome to disagree with me all you want. But when your argument is, does Pete even watch the games? You're not making a good argument. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about Alex Freeman. He's a very athletic kid who's broken out here now at Orlando City. Didn't have a bad Gold Cup, but also didn't have a great Gold Cup, right? Didn't really offer much attacking wise, was generally defensively more solid than Max Arfson. Although against Guatemala, he had some real stinkers as well. I think there's some upside with Alex Freeman. And I think hopefully he leaves MLS at some point and goes to Europe and tries to develop. And for me right now, he's probably third choice right back. But some of the stuff being said about this kid online is quite interesting. And so I'm going to push back on it a little bit. This one here is from Zach Lowry. Okay. Hot take. Alex Freeman is going to be the USMNT starting right back in the 2026 World Cup. Not Serginho Dest, people. Alex Freeman. Not Joe Scally, Alex Freeman. His ability to read the game, okay, come up with an intervention, okay, and burst up the line is there with the best. The best where? In MLS? Maybe. In the world? In Europe? Versus Serginho Dest? No. In terms of applying pressure, he's so effective at cutting off the angle. Okay, Zach, my friend. This guy, by the way, MLS journalist. Where do we start? Notice how everything you've said is not things that you can really quantify. They're things that you're like, oh, he's good at cutting off the angle. Yeah, everybody's good at cutting off the angle. I have 9-year-olds. I've seen 9-year-olds be good at cutting off angles. Reading the game is great. Being good in reading a game not the same thing. I can read a game very well. Doesn't make me a good player, right? Coaches can read a game. Doesn't mean they should be playing over Serginho Dest. Come in with an intervention. That's a very classic American soccer way of saying intercept or make a tackle. I think this is nonsense. I think that he's a good young player, but suggesting in any way, shape, or form that he's better than Serginho Dest or that he should start for the U.S. over Serginho Dest is absolute MLS shill propaganda. And it's continuing to be peddled. USMNT Prospects, who is independent, this guy's not an MLS shill, but is also buying the hype. Freeman is going to take that spot from Dest within the next few years. I wouldn't rule out it's by the 2026 World Cup, but I think that may be a little too soon. And that's where I have to disagree with MLS Prospects here. No, he is never going to be better than Dest, and I'll tell you why. He does not have the technical foundation that Dest has, okay? Dest has a technical foundation that is so good, and that is why, despite an ACL tear, he can come back and be playing very, very well the way that he is for the best team in the Eredivisie. Dest might be our most technical player. At best, you could argue him and Pulisic are our two most technical players. For anybody to say that this guy who has, played 6 months of professional soccer in Major League Soccer and was at best mediocre during the Gold Cup is somehow magically going to be better than Dest is insane. Doug McIntyre also recently said this about Mr. Alex Freeman, which I also had to call out. See if I can find it here, because it was quite an interesting thing to say, and one that I disagreed with. Go through my Twitter, y'all. Here we go. Freeman will be a 15 to 20 million starter in the Premier League this time next year. He's legit. You realize they only hype these guys up because they're in MLS. He will not be a starter. The gap from MLS to the Prem is huge, you guys. Even Miguel Almiron, who was the most expensive transfer from the US, from MLS to the Prem, and he was not developed in MLS. This guy was developed in South America, struggled at Newcastle. It took him some time, even after he made a transfer to Newcastle. Alex Freeman is nowhere near the level of Miguel Almiron when he was in MLS. Nowhere near it. So this is the sort of nonsense that sort of coincides with Poch promoting MLS players, is the shills and the propagandists coming out with all the same talking points. Their new darling is Alex Freeman. Patrick Aguimang is injured, not in this camp, so we can't promote him and say he's going to play for Barcelona. Now Alex Freeman is going to be, the next, not only the next big thing, and he may become a good player one day, and I hope that he does continue to develop. He may challenge Joe Scally one day. You can say that. But come on, I've watched this guy play many, 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 many times. He is nowhere near Dest offensively and currently nowhere near Scally defensively. Okay? So this sort of stuff that is just being used to hype up MLS players. What they forget is that this fan base is a lot more educated than they think. This fan base is capable of watching players for ourselves and going, no, you are full of shit. And it just makes you an unreliable narrator because we know that you are here to promote a business, not to talk about soccer, right? That this is why we don't really have good soccer journalists or media in this country, because they're not here to talk about soccer. Most of them couldn't tell a good soccer player if he kicked the ball in their face. Most of them are being paid to promote MLS, and they do that in a variety of ways. One of the ways that they do that is to hype up MLS players, get them on the national team. We've seen this many, 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 many times before, right? A guy like Jesus Ferreira, obviously, for a long time. Chris Mueller was it for a while. People were saying he should, start over Pulisic after some good January camp performances, okay? He's not even a good MLS player anymore. We've seen this with Duncan McGuire. We've seen this with Daryl Dike. We've seen this with Brandon Vasquez, with Patrick Aguimang, with Miles Robinson, with Walker Zimmerman, with Shaquille Moore, Kellen Acosta, Christian Roldan, Jackson Ewell, Jonathan Lewis, the list of Cade Cowell. The list goes on and on and on of these guys who started being hyped up because they had a few good games in MLS. And then when me or TAC or, an independent content creator, Straight Red, whoever, the Ultras kids were like, no, they're really not that good. People are like, no, he really is. And then what happened to all of those guys now? They're exactly where we said they're going to be. So this is not surprising to me. This is more of the same, hyping up the latest MLS prospect as though they mean so. It's also why we get a lot of hype for Kevin Sullivan, who is a very good young player, and I'm interested to see where he goes, but almost none from the MLS shill media for Mathis Albert, who is probably a better player right now anyways. But, this is nothing new, guys. This is what we see frequently, and it is my job to call it out and to give my opinion, and you're welcome to agree or disagree with me, except that most of the time, 90% of the time, when I tell you this particular player that's being completely overhyped is not as good as everyone is saying as he is, I've been right. And that's not arrogance, it's just true. So it is what it is. Believe what you want about Alex Freeman. I'm actually hoping Alex Freeman develops into a very good player because we need quality in depth across the roster so that if we are calling up our third choice right back or we do have injuries, we need better players. For him to become a very good player, he needs to get out of MLS and go to Europe. Otherwise, his potential will be capped. You can only become so good in MLS because you're only as good as the league that you play in, right? And if you stay here long term, look, could Jesus Ferreira maybe have improved as a player if he left MLS at a certain point? Maybe, yeah, certainly. I think he could have, right? Or at the very least, Europe becomes a proving ground, right? Because if you cannot go to Europe and perform, then you are probably not a very good player, right? That's usually how that works. Most journalists in 2025 soccer are not paid to keep people in power, are paid to keep people in power, not to investigate people in power like in the past. Yes, exactly. So that's it from me, guys. Thank you for hanging out, for watching the stream. Don't forget to hit that like button before you go. And if you haven't subscribed to the new backup channel yet, do so. I will keep you posted on the original channel, which hopefully will be back soon. But based on my interactions with Google, I am not optimistic. All right, guys, have a great Friday. I will see you all on Sunday for the top 10. We'll have our first top 10 of the season. We'll be back. All right. Love to all. Hopefully, we'll see how we do in South Korea next Saturday and then Japan the following week. Talk to y'all soon.